The surface of Dreas Moon was a wasteland of scorched earth and twisted metal, remnants of 1,000 battles fought by soldiers from across the galaxy. Among the wreckage lay Fang, a creature engineered for war by the formidable Zyrak race. He had once been their prized war dog, a creature bred for strength, speed, and aggression. But in the eyes of the Zyrak, he was flawed, a hulking mass of sinew and scales, covered in scars, with features deemed too grotesque, even for a war dog. When the battle ended, and the Zyrak's forces had retreated, they left Fang behind without a second thought. To them, he was a failed experiment, a beast that had served its purpose but held no place in their ranks. As the hours passed, Fang's breathing grew labored, and his once bright eyes dulled with exhaustion and hunger. The creature lay unmoving, resigned to his fate on the barren plains of Dreas, but fate had other plans. A distant rumble grew louder, and Fang's ears pricked up. A small vessel descended from the sky, maneuvering expertly through the debris and touching down a short distance from him. A lone figure stepped out, silhouetted against the evening light, a human, lean and rough-edged, dressed in the makeshift gear of a scavenger. His name was Eli, a rogue trader known for salvaging parts from abandoned battlefields. Eli scanned the landscape, his eyes sharp, searching for anything of value amid the destruction. That was when he noticed the strange creature, half buried under debris, watching him with weary, piercing eyes. "What do we have here?" Eli murmured, approaching cautiously. Fang growled low, warning the intruder to keep his distance, but his weakened state betrayed him. His growl wavered, and his head drooped, unable to maintain the strength that had once defined him as a Zyrak war dog. Eli paused, recognizing the creature's defensive posture. "Easy there, big guy," he said softly, pulling a flask from his pack. He crouched down, careful to keep a safe distance, and poured a small stream of water onto his hand, holding it out in offering. Fang hesitated, his nose twitching at the scent of water. His instincts screamed at him to attack, to defend himself, but exhaustion overpowered pride. Slowly, cautiously, he inched forward, sniffing the water in Eli's hand before lapping it up. Eli smiled faintly. "There you go, you look like you've had a rough go of it." The war dog's dull eyes met Eli's, and for the first time, the creature saw not a handler, not a master, but something different, a look of genuine concern. He didn't know what to make of it. Fang had known only commands and orders, brutality and neglect, but this human had no collar, no leash, only a gentleness that unsettled him. Eli carefully reached out, letting his hand rest on Fang's shoulder. "I don't know how you ended up here, but something tells me you're tougher than you look," he murmured. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." Fang watched, wary but too drained to resist as Eli lifted him, straining under the creature's weight, and carried him to his small ship. Fang, abandoned by his own kind, was no longer alone. Eli's ship, the Aurora, was a small, battered vessel but sturdy enough to travel the harsh regions around Dreas Moon. As he brought Fang on board, Eli set him down gently on a makeshift bed of blankets in the cargo hold. The war dog's eyes darted around the unfamiliar environment, a deep instinctual tension in his muscles despite his fatigue. Eli knelt beside him, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "I'm not sure what you've been through, but you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." Fang's gaze remained fixed on Eli, his breaths heavy. The creature's survival instincts ran deep, honed by years of training and conditioning, yet there was a strange, calming presence about this human that eased his wariness, if only slightly. Over the next few hours, Eli worked quietly, checking Fang's injuries and cleaning him up as best he could. Fang watched him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, but as the hours passed he began to relax, his body giving in to the exhaustion he had been fighting for so long. As he worked, Eli spoke to Fang, as if the creature could understand every word. "It's a strange galaxy, you know. I've been on my own for most of it. No family, no crew, just me and this old ship. But I have a feeling you and I are going to get along just fine." Fang huffed softly, as if responding to Eli's musings. There was a faint gleam in his eyes now, a glimmer of life that had been dulled by neglect and cruelty. After a while, Eli sat back, looking at the war dog with a thoughtful expression. "I can't just keep calling you big guy. You need a name. How about Fang?" The creature tilted his head, as if considering the suggestion. Eli chuckled. "Fang it is, then. As the days passed, Eli worked on patching up Fang's injuries and gradually feeding him back to health. He was patient, moving slowly, giving the war dog space to adjust to his new environment. Fang's initial suspicion faded, replaced by a hesitant curiosity. He began to follow Eli around the ship, watching his every move, studying him as he went about his daily tasks. One day, as Eli was fixing a loose panel in the engine room, Fang came up behind him, sniffing the tools on the floor. Eli laughed, glancing over his shoulder. "So you're my assistant now, huh?" Fang chuffed softly, nudging a wrench toward him with his nose. Eli accepted it with a grin. "Good boy, Fang. Maybe I should put you on the payroll." Eli realized that Fang wasn't just a creature of brute strength. He was intelligent, capable of understanding and responding in ways Eli hadn't expected. They began to develop a system, an unspoken language, where Fang would help with small tasks, fetching tools, alerting Eli to noises on the ship. The war dog had gone from an abandoned soldier to a loyal companion. One evening, as they drifted in the quiet of space, Eli found himself talking to Fang, sharing stories of his travels, the people he'd met, the battles he'd avoided. Fang lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, listening as if he understood every word. Eli felt a strange warmth, a sense of companionship he hadn't known in years. "You're not like any other war dog, are you, Fang?" Eli said softly. "Maybe that's why they left you behind, but their loss is my gain." Fang's eyes met his, and in that moment, Eli knew that he'd found more than a companion. He had found a friend, a kindred spirit who, like him, had been cast aside by the world, but refused to let it define him. And as they traveled through the vast unknown, both man and beast knew they had finally found something worth fighting for. In the weeks that followed, the Aurora became more than just a ship to Eli and Fang. It became a home. Eli wasn't just nursing Fang back to health. He was learning what it meant to gain the trust of a creature that had known nothing but commands, orders, and rejection. Fang was slow to warm up, his instincts always alert, his body tense at every unfamiliar sound. But gradually, he grew comfortable around Eli, recognizing that this human meant no harm. Eli kept his movements gentle, his voice steady, allowing Fang to come to him on his own terms. One evening, after a long day of repairs and salvaging, Eli noticed Fang watching him from across the room, his gaze sharp yet curious. Eli reached out a hand, palm open, offering an invitation rather than an order. Fang's nostrils flared as he sniffed the air, his massive, scarred head inching closer, his dark eyes locked on Eli's face. After a moment's hesitation, Fang nudged Eli's hand, a tentative acceptance. Eli's fingers brushed Fang's fur gently, feeling the coarse texture of a creature bred for survival. "There you go, big guy." Eli murmured with a soft smile, "Told you I wasn't going anywhere." From that point on, something shifted between them. Fang started to follow Eli as he moved around the ship, watching him with a quiet intensity, as if trying to understand this strange, compassionate human. Eli, in turn, found himself talking to Fang more openly, sharing memories, fears, and dreams he'd never spoken aloud. He hadn't realized how lonely he'd been until he had someone, something, to listen. One day, as Eli was repairing a broken panel in the cargo hold, he felt Fang settle beside him, laying his large head near Eli's hand. It was a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes. Fang was letting his guard down, offering his trust, and Eli couldn't have been more grateful. "You know, you're not just a war dog, Fang," Eli said, scratching behind the creature's ear. "You're loyal, smart, and brave. They might have made you for battle, but you're so much more than that." Fang chuffed, closing his eyes as if to enjoy the rare moment of peace. And for the first time in his life, he felt something other than orders or discipline. He felt companionship. But their newfound bond would soon be tested in ways neither of them could have predicted. The peaceful routine of their days together was shattered when Eli and Fang arrived on a small, lawless trading station called Escheron. Eli needed supplies, and the station offered a black market variety of goods, including rare parts that could keep the Aurora running for another few months. He left Fang aboard the ship, fearing the attention a massive, scarred war dog might attract. But as he moved through the crowded market, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. After bartering for supplies, he headed back to the ship only to find Fang agitated, pacing restlessly. As soon as Eli entered, Fang pushed against him, almost knocking him over, whining with a low growl as his eyes darted around the cabin. "What's wrong, boy?" Eli asked, kneeling down. "Something spook you?" Fang's ears perked up, and he turned his head toward the hatch, his hackles raised. Eli felt a prickling sense of unease and quickly secured the ship, checking the sensors. Moments later, his worst suspicions were confirmed. Two unknown figures approached the ship, and their weapons glinted under the dim station lights. "Looks like we've got company," Eli muttered, adrenaline kicking in. He'd had his fair share of scrapes, but Fang's reaction told him these weren't just petty thieves. Eli grabbed his blaster, nodding at Fang. "Stay close. Let's show them they picked the wrong ship." As the intruders breached the hatch, Fang positioned himself between Eli and the doorway, his massive form blocking the entrance as he snarled. His teeth bared in a fierce display. The sight of Fang, a war dog of the Zyrak, scarred and battle-ready, was enough to make the two intruders hesitate. But only for a moment. The first man lunged forward, blaster raised. Fang moved with terrifying speed, launching himself at the attacker with a snarl that reverberated through the ship. He took down the first intruder in seconds, his powerful jaws clamping onto the man's arm, disabling him before throwing him back with a force that sent him crashing into the bulkhead. The second intruder aimed at Fang, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Eli fired first, his blaster bolt knocking the weapon from the attacker's hand. Fang seized the opportunity, lunging forward and pinning the man to the ground, his growl a warning that needed no translation. The intruders were subdued, and Eli quickly secured them, binding their hands and checking them for any devices that could cause more trouble. With the situation under control, he let out a shaky breath, turning to Fang, who stood protectively by his side, his intense gaze focused on Eli. "You saved my life, Fang," Eli said softly, placing a hand on the creature's broad head. Fang leaned into the touch, his fierce growl fading as he relaxed, reassured by Eli's presence. After alerting the station's security to remove the intruders, Eli and Fang returned to the quiet of the ship. Eli knelt beside Fang, inspecting him for injuries, but the war dog appeared unharmed, his powerful body built for far worse encounters. "You're more than just my protector, aren't you?" Eli murmured, scratching Fang's ear. "You're my partner." Fang's eyes softened, and for the first time he rested his head against Eli's shoulder. The creature who had once only known commands, isolation, and rejection had found something he never thought possible: loyalty, not born of duty, but of trust. That night, as they drifted away from Escheron, Eli realized that their bond had become something deeper than companionship. Fang was no longer just a war dog, he was family, a creature who had risked everything to protect him. And Eli silently vowed to never let Fang experience abandonment again. For in Fang, Eli had found not just a protector, but a friend who would face any danger by his side. And together, they were stronger than either could have imagined. A few days after their encounter on Escheron, Eli and Fang were drawn into yet another unexpected test. They were traveling through a remote sector of space, a known thoroughfare for scavengers and bounty hunters. Eli was careful, keeping the Aurora under low emissions to avoid unwanted attention. But their luck ran out when a warning alarm blared, signaling an unidentified vessel closing in. "Damn it," Eli muttered, scanning the sensors. The approaching ship was a sleek, heavily armed bounty hunter vessel, known for its speed and firepower. Eli had dealt with bounty hunters before, but this one wasn't backing down. It was angling to intercept them. "We're not here to cause trouble," Eli called over the comms, trying to negotiate, but the reply was terse and cold. "We've tracked your ship since Escheron, human. Word is you've got something valuable on board. Hand it over, and we'll make this quick." Eli's heart pounded. He glanced at Fang, who was watching him intently, his sharp eyes sensing the rising danger. There was no question about it. The bounty hunters were after Fang, likely recognizing the value of a Zyrak war dog. Despite Fang's battle scars and imperfect form, to the right buyer, he would be worth a fortune. "No deal," Eli replied, switching off the comms. He looked at Fang, his voice filled with conviction. "We're getting out of this together." As the bounty hunter ship moved in, its weapons charged and ready, Eli and Fang sprang into action. Eli took the helm, pushing the Aurora's engines to their limits, weaving through asteroid fields and debris left over from past battles. But the Hunter was relentless, its larger, faster ship staying on their tail and firing relentlessly. Fang paced in the co-pilot area, his ears perked and his gaze fixed on the enemy ship through the viewport. Eli noticed and quickly formulated a plan. "All right, big guy," he said, glancing over at Fang. "How do you feel about giving them a little surprise?" He redirected power from the shields to the forward thrusters, creating a brief burst of speed. The Aurora darted through a particularly dense asteroid cluster, and just as the bounty hunter ship followed, Eli cut the power abruptly. The sudden halt threw off the enemy's tracking, and the hunter vessel drifted into range of a hidden asteroid. "Now!" Eli shouted. Fang leaped up, slamming his paw down on the weapon controls. The Aurora's defensive turrets, newly repaired from Escheron, fired on the asteroid, sending a cloud of debris hurtling toward the bounty hunter ship. It struck hard, damaging their shields and sending their vessel into a spin. Eli seized the chance, activating the Aurora's engines again, pushing forward as they left the disoriented hunters behind. Within moments, they were free, the enemy ship nothing more than a blip fading from their sensors. As the Aurora flew to safety, Eli turned to Fang, his adrenaline still pumping. "You did it, Fang," he said, reaching over to pat the war dog on his scarred head. "We took them down together." Fang chuffed softly, a pleased glint in his eyes. It wasn't just survival, it was teamwork. And in that moment, Eli knew they were no longer just man and beast. They were a team, bound by something far deeper than necessity. After the encounter with the bounty hunters, Eli decided it was time to understand more about Fang's origins. Their bond had grown, and Eli wanted to know why a creature as loyal and powerful as Fang had been cast aside. With the information he'd gathered from their travels, Eli tracked down a location rumored to house records on Zyrak's genetic engineering program, a remote, hidden facility on a cold, desolate planet in the Orion sector. They landed cautiously, and Eli left Fang in the ship's cockpit with a watchful eye on the scanners while he explored the abandoned facility. The building was cold, lifeless, and filled with remnants of experiments and technologies Eli could barely understand. Finally, he stumbled upon a dusty control room with storage units packed with data drives. After some trial and error, Eli activated the central console and accessed the archives. What he found shocked him. The files revealed the grim truth about the Xerax Wardog program. These creatures were genetically engineered, bred in batches, each unit designed for specific traits like strength, speed, and aggression. But if a Wardog showed even the slightest defect, a physical flaw, a behavioral anomaly, it was immediately discarded, deemed unworthy of the Xerax's pristine, brutal standards. And there, in a set of old records, he found Fang's batch number. Fang had been classified as flawed due to his scars, his asymmetrical form, and a deviation in aggression response, which translated to an inability to follow commands with complete obedience. In short, Fang was deemed too independent for the Xerax to control fully, a trait that had saved Eli's life on more than one occasion but had led the Xerax to abandon him. Eli's heart twisted as he realized what this meant. Fang had been tossed aside not because he was weak, but because he was too strong-willed, too unique for the Xerax's rigid control. Fang's loyalty, his ability to think and act independently, had set him apart, and it was exactly why the Xerax had left him for dead. When Eli returned to the ship, he found Fang waiting at the entrance, sensing his unease. He knelt beside the war dog, placing a hand on his head, looking into his deep, knowing eyes. "They never deserved you, Fang," Eli said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not a weapon or a tool. You're your own being, and no one has the right to tell you otherwise." Fang leaned into Eli's touch, letting out a soft whine as if he understood every word. Eli continued, feeling a renewed purpose swell within him. "I can't change what they did, but I swear, I'll never let anyone use you like that again. You're free, Fang, free to be exactly who you are." Fang's eyes glistened, and he rested his head on Eli's shoulder in a rare display of affection. In that moment, Eli knew that their journey wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming Fang's dignity, his freedom, and ensuring that no other creature would face the same fate Fang had. As they left the facility behind, Eli knew they would face new challenges, perhaps even more hunters and obstacles. But together, they would carve out a future that would defy everything Fang's creators had intended for him. From that day on, Eli no longer saw Fang as a war dog. He saw him as a friend, a fellow traveler, and a reminder that sometimes the most remarkable souls are those deemed flawed by others. And together, they would fight to ensure that Fang's story, his resilience, and his loyalty would be known across the stars. After uncovering Fang's past, Eli knew their journey couldn't just be about their survival. It was now a mission to expose the Zirak's cruel genetic program. Every war dog, abandoned for being too independent or imperfect, deserved freedom. As they traveled from one starport to another, Eli began gathering evidence, piecing together information from former Zirak soldiers, sympathizers, and the rare escaped war dog handlers who had turned against their regime. Fang, now fully healed and stronger than ever, was Eli's constant companion. His presence alone often drew wary glances from others, but word had begun to spread about the human with a war dog at his side, an unusual, loyal creature once abandoned, but now renowned for his intelligence and strength. Eli's plan grew more ambitious with each passing day. If they could reach the Galactic Council, perhaps they could make a case to shut down the Zirak's war dog program altogether. But to get there, they needed a coalition, voices loud enough and strong enough to catch the Council's attention. One evening, as Eli and Fang prepared to leave yet another starport, a small group of rebels approached them. They were a mix of species, some Zirak dissenters, others sympathetic aliens who had heard of Eli's mission. Their leader, a hardened Zirak defector named Erin, had a striking scar across her face, a mark from a war dog attack she had barely survived. "I know what you're trying to do, human," Erin said, eyeing Fang with both caution and admiration. "I trained these creatures for years. I know what they're capable of, but the Zirak treat them as nothing more than tools, and they discard them if they dare to have a will of their own. If you're really serious about exposing them, we want in." Eli studied Erin's face, noting the haunted look in her eyes. "Then join us," he said. "The Zirak need to answer for what they've done to these creatures. But I can't do this alone." Erin nodded, her gaze flickering to Fang. "If that war dog trusts you, human, then I do too. I'll gather allies, other defectors, rebels, anyone willing to challenge the Zirak's practices. Together, we'll bring this to the Council." As they prepared to set off, Eli felt a surge of determination. With allies gathering across the galaxy, they were no longer just one man and a war dog. They were a movement, a coalition fighting for justice for creatures like Fang. And as the stars stretched before them, Eli knew they were closer than ever to changing the galaxy. The journey to the Galactic Council was tense and fraught with danger. The Zirak had learned of their efforts, dispatching bounty hunters and agents to intercept Eli and his growing band of allies. Despite the obstacles, Eli, Fang, and the coalition pressed on, fighting off ambushes and evading capture as they moved through hostile sectors. At last, they arrived at the heart of the galaxy, the Council's central station, a colossal structure orbiting a luminous star. Ella, Erin, and a few key allies, with Fang at their side, approached the Council chambers, determined to make their voices heard. The Council members, representatives from hundreds of worlds and species, sat in a grand circular hall, their attention turning to the unusual pair at the center, an ordinary human and a Zirak war dog, both worn but resolute. The presiding counselor, an elderly Falian with silvery feathers, regarded Eli with curiosity. "Human, you have requested an audience with the Council to speak of grave matters. Present your case." Eli took a steadying breath, feeling Fang's presence beside him like a steady anchor. "Counselors, I come before you with evidence of the Zirak's war dog program. A brutal system that discards and exploits creatures like Fang here, simply because they don't conform to a perfect model of obedience and aggression." He held up a small hologram, activating it to reveal footage from the abandoned Zirak facility, images of Fang's batch records, and testimonies from defectors like Erin. "These war dogs are sentient, capable of independent thought and loyalty, but if they show any sign of free will, they're abandoned or destroyed. Fang here was left to die on Dreas Moon, simply because he wasn't compliant enough for the Zirak. A murmur spread through the chamber as the counselors reviewed the evidence. Fang stood tall beside Eli, his scarred face and intelligent eyes a silent testament to his survival and resilience. Aaron stepped forward next. I served as a handler in the Zyrak military. I saw firsthand the horrors of their program. These creatures are more than weapons. They're individuals, discarded only because they dared to be more than what the Zyrak wanted. The council listened, their expressions shifting from curiosity to anger and disgust as they absorbed the full scope of the Zyrak's cruelty. Finally, the presiding counselor leaned forward, addressing the chamber. We have seen creatures used for war before, but this program goes beyond any acceptable practice. The Zyrak have disregarded the rights of these beings, treating them as nothing more than expendable commodities. A Zyrak representative present in the chamber rose to his feet, his face a mask of defiance. These war dogs were created for our defense. They are tools, nothing more. If they fail, they are disposed of. It is our right to manage our assets as we see fit. The counselor's gaze hardened. Creatures like Fang are not mere assets. They are beings with lives, emotions, and loyalty beyond the measure of war. Your program is an affront to all who value life. After a lengthy debate, the council ruled that the Zyrak's war dog program violated intergalactic laws against genetic exploitation. Effective immediately, the program would be dismantled, and all surviving war dogs would be granted sanctuary. A reparations fund would be established to aid in the rehabilitation of the war dogs, and a new interspecies oversight committee would monitor any similar programs in the future. Eli felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. They had fought for Fang and all the war dogs who had been treated as expendable. Beside him, Fang looked up, meeting his gaze with a soft whine, as if sensing the weight of the victory. As they left the council chambers, Fang lifted his head and let out a long, triumphant howl, the sound echoing through the vast hall and beyond. It was a howl of freedom, of vindication, of a creature who had fought against his fate and emerged victorious. Eli rested a hand on Fang's head, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. They had changed the course of countless lives, and in doing so, they had forged a bond unbreakable by anything the galaxy could throw at them. Together, they had turned an abandoned war dog into a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of loyalty, and a reminder that even the fiercest creatures deserved a chance to be more than what they were made for. As the council's ruling spread across the galaxy, the impact was immediate. Stations and settlements that had once feared the Zyrak war dogs now began to rally in support of Eli and Fang's cause. More allies came forward, offering resources, homes, and rehabilitation programs for the war dogs who had been rescued from the Zyrak's brutal program. It was a triumph beyond anything Eli could have hoped for. A victory not just for him and Fang, but for all creatures discarded by a cruel system. But the Zyrak didn't intend to let this go unanswered. Days after the ruling, as Eli and Fang were en route to a sanctuary station in the outer reaches, their ship came under attack. A squadron of Zyrak loyalists had tracked them down, hoping to silence the human who had turned the galaxy against their prized program. Alarms blared through the Aurora's cockpit as Eli dodged and weaved through the Zyrak fire, Fang at his side, his eyes sharp and alert. "We're outnumbered," Eli muttered, glancing at Fang. "This might be our last fight, buddy." Fang let out a low growl, standing ready, his body coiled with tension. They had fought hard to make it this far, and Eli wasn't about to let the Zyrak undo everything they'd accomplished. He gripped the controls, maneuvering the Aurora through debris fields, trying to shake off the pursuing ships. But the Zyrak loyalists were relentless, and the Aurora's shields began to buckle under the sustained assault. Just as Eli thought their fate was sealed, a new blip appeared on his radar. A fleet of Allied ships had arrived, answering their distress signal. Aaron's voice crackled over the comms. "Eli, hold tight, we've got your back." The Allied fleet, composed of vessels from various species who had joined the cause, tore into the Zyrak squadron with a fury, protecting Eli and Fang with unbreakable resolve. The battle raged, and one by one the Zyrak ships fell, forced to retreat under the combined firepower of the coalition. Eli and Fang breathed a sigh of relief as the last Zyrak ship vanished from their sensors. But the victory came at a cost. The Aurora had sustained heavy damage, and the ship's engine was barely functional. "We're alive, Fang," Eli said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thanks to you, and everyone who believed in us." Fang let out a quiet whine, pressing his head to Eli's side, a silent gesture of loyalty and comfort. They had survived, but the journey had taken its toll. And as they drifted through space, surrounded by allies who had come to their aid, Eli felt a deep sense of peace. Their mission was complete, and Fang would never again be seen as expendable. But there was one final journey to make. With the Aurora barely limping along, Eli and Fang were transported to the newly established War Dog Sanctuary on a lush, forested planet known as Elara Prime. It was a world far from any conflict, a haven where the war dogs could roam freely, recover, and discover lives beyond battle. As Eli and Fang disembarked from the rescue shuttle, they were greeted by a vast field stretching to the horizon, dotted with other war dogs who had been rescued from the Xerax program. Fang lifted his head, watching as creatures just like him explored the open spaces, playing, resting, and living without fear or orders. The sanctuary staff welcomed them warmly, offering medical care and comfort, and expressing their gratitude to Eli for his relentless fight for justice. Fang, still beside him, watched as the other war dogs began to approach him, sniffing and observing. Curious about this legendary creature who had paved the way for their freedom, Eli knelt down beside Fang, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This is it, big guy. You're free now. No more commands, no more battles. You're home." Fang's eyes met Eli's, a deep intelligence and understanding shining through. He let out a soft whine, nuzzling Eli's hand with a gratitude that needed no words. They had been through so much together, and now Fang would have a life of peace and dignity, a chance to live on his own terms. Days passed, and Fang grew comfortable among his kind. He spent his days running through the open fields, napping under the warm sun, and exploring the sanctuary. Yet every night he returned to Eli's side, a silent but steadfast reminder of their bond. On their last evening together before Eli's departure, they sat atop a hill overlooking the sanctuary. The stars stretched endlessly above them, casting a soft glow over the land. Eli wrapped an arm around Fang, his heart swelling with emotion. "You're going to be all right here, Fang," he said softly. "This is your place now." Fang's gaze was calm, yet Eli sensed a flicker of sadness in his eyes, as if he too understood that their paths were diverging. But he also sensed Fang's acceptance, an unspoken gratitude for all they had been through together. The following morning, as Eli prepared to leave, Fang walked with him to the shuttle's entrance. His steps measured, his eyes bright and watchful. Eli knelt down one last time, placing a gentle hand on Fang's scarred head. "Thank you, Fang," Eli murmured, "for everything. I'll never forget you." Fang pressed his head to Eli's shoulder, a farewell from a creature who had learned to trust and love in a way neither of them had ever thought possible. As the shuttle lifted off, Eli watched from the viewport as Fang stood in the clearing, his figure strong and proud against the backdrop of Elara Prime. He felt both an ache and a deep peace in his chest. He had saved Fang, but in so many ways, Fang had saved him too. Eli's heart swelled with pride as he thought of all they had accomplished together, of the lives they had changed, and of the impact Fang would leave behind. Fang was no longer a tool of war, but a symbol of resilience, freedom, and the unbreakable bond forged between two souls from different worlds. And as the shuttle soared into the stars, Eli knew that Fang would carry their legacy forward, a creature once deemed too flawed for battle, now a beacon of hope, loyalty, and love for generations to come.